Okay, well, it looks like it's 12 o'clock, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our first book sandwich din of the season. And today, Lisa Kelly will review the book, You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey, Crazy Stories About Racism by Amber Ruffin and her sister, Lacey Lamar. Lisa is a retired Elmira City School District school administrator who throughout her career emphasized and promoted the importance of early literacy development and the love of books and reading for all. So during our book review, please remain muted and cameras off till the end of the talk. Also, if you have any questions, please hold them till the end and type them into chat. And I'll read the questions out loud. So without further delay, Lisa.
Hi there. I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon. I'm particularly happy to see people. If I don't see you, I'm hearing or see your name, people who have been important people in my life. So welcome. This is my first sandwiched in book review. When I was asked to do it, as it was something that I hadn't done, I took it on as a challenge out of my comfort zone. So I've been working on it for a while, and I hope that our conversation this afternoon is something that gets you thinking and reflecting on how we all interact with people who are different than ourselves. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk about the purposes of our book talk, how I came to choose this particular book, which also involves some of my pandemic activities, my intention of why I read the book. We'll take a look at some of the stories that Amber has told in her book, and I hope that we have some time also to interact with one another so that I get your impressions of the book. Now, I am making an assumption that some of you have read the book already. Perhaps some of you are thinking about reading the book. So I know that maybe our audience is split that way. But when I was first asked early in the summer to do this book talk, it sort of took me back to my days in school when I had to write a book report. And believe it or not, reading was something that I always loved, but I wasn't really very good. So when I had to do a book report, that in itself was a challenge because I had to read a book cover to cover. And I stuck with a very strategic format in my own book reports. I said whether I liked it or I didn't like it. And then I answered the question, because. And that was my book report, and I handed it in. Done. But now I suppose that a book review should promote thought, reflection, conversation, and of course, enjoyment for all of us. As we go through this hour together, my intention is not to be controversial. It's not an opportunity to bait our own views of life. I will not ask you to consider my point of view, and I won't ask you to change your point of view if it's different than what I present. As we continue, what I hope happens during this time is that if you haven't already, it encourages you to read this book, that it offers you a perspective of one's life that may be different than your own, Encourage you to be reflective in how you interact and treat all people. And finally, encourage you to pass this book on to others so that we can improve the world around us through kindness and respect for one another, particularly those who are different than ourselves. So, how did I come to read this particular book? During the pandemic lock-in, I'm sure, like myself, we've done many things that we hadn't done for a while. Or we went back to things that we previously enjoyed, but only thought we could do it if I only had the time. We probably share the fact that we all cleaned out at least one closet. If you are an overachiever, and I know that some of you probably are, you probably cleaned out an entire household. So kudos to all of you. I wish I had. I found myself during the pandemic doing a couple different things regularly. I rededicated myself to taking a daily walk. I appliqued and beaded felt Christmas stockings, which I had done probably 40 years previously. I revisited my love for needlepoint, and I watched an incredible amount of news shows, and the news was not necessarily enjoyable. But I also started to watch recorded late night TV shows. And this is where I discovered Amber Ruffin, the author of our book today. Amber Ruffin is a comedy writer on the Seth Meyers show, on the late night show. Every now and then during the pandemic, she would be featured in a comedy segment. And particularly during the Black Lives Matter incidents and stories about George Floyd's death, she would do nightly stories that she told of her own experiences interacting and encountering police. And some of them were quite dramatic, like going 5 miles over the speed limit, skipping down a back alley in joyful celebration of seeing a friend. And another story she told, when she encountered a police officer in a negative fashion, was when she was returning a friend's wallet, standing on her back porch in the middle of the night in her pajamas. Obviously, these are not necessarily the results of incredible criminal activity or illegal activities, but her stories were unbelievable and horrific at the same time. Seeing her on TV and hearing her stories at least put Amber Ruffin on my radar. Late in 2020, I found that she had a book coming out early in 2021, and it would be a collection of and an extension of the stories that she had told on Seth Meyers' show. The collection are stories mostly of her sister, Lacey, who is a well-accomplished woman working in the healthcare field. And her stories also highlighted her family, and certainly the stories highlight how Black people are treated in everyday life. I definitely put it on my reading list. Knowing the premise of the book, my intention to read the book was to do a couple of different things. First, broaden my horizons. The other thing that was very important to me was to check my own behaviors and interactions with not only Black people, but most importantly, all people who were different than myself. This was particularly important to myself, As an educator for more than 40 years, I always worked with students and families who were compromised. They were from low income backgrounds. They were always families that were extremely transient, moving from place to place, month to month. They were families and students of low literacy skills. And many of them were single family, matriarchal in nature. And they also had food struggles. So my question to myself, the essential question was I who I thought I was? I had worked with compromised students and families for so long. I know that I was educating students more than just in classrooms. And fortunately for myself, I had wonderful people that I worked with that also felt that education wasn't just about the classroom, but how we helped students reach their full potential. And when a child comes to school and they're hungry, or their clothing isn't appropriate, there's so many factors that interfere with what they're learning. So as a result of that, there were many times I worked with people that we put programs together just to provide basic needs for children and families. An extra peanut butter and jelly sandwich at lunchtime means the world to a child who has just that meal for the entire day. Providing mittens, boots, coats, so that they can be warm coming to school. I'm not sure that many people would want to come to school if they were freezing along the way as they walked to school. There were a program that I developed with colleagues to promote literacy for the entire family as we opened a school library at night, so an entire family could come to and enjoy books and magazines together. So it truly is a village raising our community. So was I who I thought I was? So I wanted to reflect on my words and my actions. Were they ever offensive to others? Certainly that must have happened, but that was never my intention. But the important lesson would be, did the receiver hear or interpret my words and actions as I had really intended them to be? So, You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey presents serious topics in a humorous manner that makes you say, what? Really? They said that? So I'm going to share a true story from many, many years ago. When I first came to Elmira in 1972, yes, right after the flood, I was a teacher at Facet School. This school served mostly the children of Hawthorne Court. This was a community housing project that was supported by the Department of Social Services and government funding. The students were from families who lived in homes also on nearby streets. At the time, it was a time where it was important that schools were integrated, and you need to keep that in mind. So the principal at the time at Facet School was a very caring gentleman. He did have some quirks, and as a principal myself, I'm sure my own staff would say, yes, she had her quirks. But he was truly caring, and he wanted to do the best that he could do for all of the students that came to his school, and making sure that he had an integrated school, a school that had integrated classrooms. He had his own procedures each and every day. So as the school day started and the kids were settled in their desks, the principal would come by and stop at your door, certainly interrupting whatever was going on in your classroom. And these are the questions he would ask, and this is true. He would say, "How many boys do you have, Mrs. Kelly?" And I would reply. He'd say, "How many girls in your classroom?" And I would reply, "How many Black children do you have?" And I would reply, "White children, how many do you have?" He would then ask, "How many Black boys do you have? How many Black girls do you have? How many white girls do you have? How many white boys do you have?" This went on and on and on. Enough. They were integrated classrooms as he had wanted them to be. But day after day, it was an old story. So having that as the background, this very caring principal also loved to use the public address system. And he would relate all kinds of things throughout the day. He didn't really matter if you were teaching or you weren't teaching, but they always interrupted something. So one day he got on the public address system and it was coming into all of the classrooms. And the message on the public address system was, "Will all the white children please come to the office?" I thought to myself, did I hear that right? Was that what he intended? Actually, teachers stepped out into the classrooms to see their colleagues, and they all said, "What? Really? Did he say that? Did he mean that?" So you can guess what happened. Chaos began, and all the white children started filing out of the classrooms, heading towards the main office. It was only a moment later when the PA came back on and he clarified his comment. What he meant to say, "Will the children in the white family please come to the office ready to leave for the day?" Aha, that's what he meant. This is a story for many reasons that are wrong, but it does illustrate, are your words and actions interpreted as you had intended? A good question to ask. So if we look at the collection of books, mostly the author has shared stories about her sisters and her family members. So many of the stories made me pause, and I tried to classify them as types of stories, but I found that to be an impossibility. So I've decided to share some stories that I'm not sure using my favorite as favorite stories, but they certainly illustrated how we treat people who are different and who are that may be influenced by our own prejudices or stereotypes of people. So as the book begins, there were a number of stories that talked about does in a culture, in a racial background, do all people seem to look the same? And Amber tells the story of when her sister was using checks to pay for something in a store. And the checks had famous Black Americans on it because it was Black American Heritage Month, and she wanted to illustrate and promote the historical figures in our country. So she wrote out the check for the correct amount and she handed it to the clerk, and the clerk looked at the check and said, "Oh, I didn't know you could have your own picture on the check." And indeed, it was a picture of Harriet Tubman. So do we all look the same if we are part of a culture? The other story that illustrates that is that her family had traveled to a national park. I believe she had said it was the Rocky Mountain National Park. And she went into the gift shop, and immediately the clerk there thought she was Whoopi Goldberg. So again, do we all look the same if we're part of a race or a culture? And other people can't determine one from the other. It really makes you take pause. I also found that one of the stories that she told about her sister was in a department store, and she was watching a clerk do a makeover, and Lacey was very enthralled by it, and asked if she could have a makeover as well. And the clerk was more than happy to accommodate her if she was willing to wait. So she waited, and it was her turn. And if you've read the book and you remember it, in order for her to achieve the look that she wanted, which they were demonstrating smoky eyes, whatever that might be, the cosmetic clerk really changed her skin tones so that she achieved the look that she wanted. Now, changing somebody's skin tone is a significant action that perhaps not intended to be malicious, but certainly would make you take pause. And if you remember correctly, there was also a picture in the book that showed her with much lighter skin tones. So is that really what the clerk had intended? Other stories about Lacey took place with Lacey's interactions with people who were in her workplace. One of them that I really had a very strong reaction to was the character, or the person actually, named Biff, who worked in the kitchen and would call the female nurses and CNAs hood rats. And the definition of hood rats is not complimentary. And if you wanted to check that on, I believe it was page 81, it does describe what a hood rat is. But Lacey brought it to the attention of her supervisors and HR, and alerting people that people felt threatened by his statements, being called a hood rat. And Lacey was very dedicated to representing people that she worked with, and she felt complimented that they trusted her to bring it to supervisors and HR personnel. And so, having been assured that there would be an investigation, it turned out that the investigation was completely bogus. That, yeah, they did ask around, but was the information recorded correctly? Was it done with the intention of bringing some resolve to not be calling people hood rats, which was so very negative to the people who had worked there. So those stories that are around workplaces, again, do we respect the people that we work with? And we don't distinguish between race, culture, gender. It really, again, makes us think, do we react? Do we do things as people interpret them the way we have intended them? Another story, there were so many stories, other stories that showed people making assumptions. We have so many stereotypes. And so with that stereotype, we're all guilty of making an assumptions. And the ones that she raised, there was a story where the person who, I believe Lacey was part of being interviewed or questioned about her family and whatnot. And the person who was asking her about her family assumed, because she was Black, that she was had siblings. She was one of 5 children, that she was raised only by a single parent. And that was, the person asked the question and made the assumption because of a stereotype, or at least it appeared that way. There were stories also, stories that in today's world, people used descriptors in unassuming ways where they would never be acceptable in this day and age, hopefully. She made reference to people who use the N-word, people who refer to her sister as the colored girl. Those are archaic in nature, and were still obviously offensive to the receiver of those terms. One story that was very interesting to me is that when you work with a group of people and you are thrilled that they do a wonderful job, they've reached their goals. Lacey was on a team that had reached their goals. I can't remember actually what organization it was, but they had set goals, worked hard, had strategies to reach their goals. They reached their goals. Their supervisor was so happy that they wanted to reward their team. And they did. And it was a t-shirt. Now, a t-shirt's a nice reward, certainly thoughtful. And I guess part of the message there is it's important to reward people who have worked hard. But the other side of it is no matter what the reward might be, it's the fact that it's recognition. So in this particular instance in the story, the supervisor gave the team t-shirts, and on the t-shirts, what it says, the print was, I believe it was hashtag we're winning, and winning was spelled, or the phrase was we winning, and it was spelled WEWINNIN, winning instead of winning. And when the supervisor was asked, why did you put that on the t-shirt? She said, well, because we are winning. Well, yes, we are winning. We're not winning, But the supervisor was upfront and said, well, that's the way you talk. So a good intention was very hurtful to the people who received it. And again, that illustrates to me the intention was good. Do we say and do, are our words and our actions received? Because many times our words and actions are not necessarily malicious, but are we thinking of the people who are hearing our words and seeing our actions? There was also an incident that she described, and if you're interested in looking at it, I believe it's on page 106. And it was about a mistake that was made. And Amber's comment was, to understand is something, to understand is one thing, not to understand is one thing. But to say you hate it is another. And those are two completely different things. And that seems to be a theme of, yeah, you can make mistakes and we'll accept that. But if you really hate it and you don't know why you hate it, that probably isn't acceptable. She also told a story about going to Disney World with her family. And this was a comical situation. And I happened to also see this on the Seth Meyers Late Show. It's one of the stories that, well, it relates to it. On the Late Show, when she and her sister were interviewed about the book, Seth Meyers had said to them, is there anything in the book that maybe is offensive to your parents, your father, your mother, whatever? And so they said, oh yeah, there's a story. There's definitely a story in there that's really going to make her mother mad. And the story was about the family had traveled to Disney World, and they were in a rental car. And if you've ever been to Disney World, and I was there many years ago, you know, everybody has a rental that's the same color. And all the parking lots at that time looked exactly the same. And also parking as much as spaces that were available, prime spaces were always at a minimal. So Lacey's mom was driving the rental, and she saw a parking space and went there, turning left into the parking space, but coming towards her was another car who would be turning right into the same space. And after having, 5 kids in the car, her mom was determined to get into that space. And let's just say there was a little road rage that was the result of that altercation in the parking lot. And they knew that their mom would not be happy with that story being told in the book. And that certainly could happen to all of us for sure. Also, the other thing I wanted to illustrate is that, you know, because this is a book about an important issue of racism and many stereotypical situations. Amber comes from a family that was extremely successful. Her parents had done military service, and that really was what brought them to the Midwest. And the story of after her parents had gotten out of the military, they started a daycare business in their part of town, which was underserved. So they saw the need and started a daycare, and it grew. It was very successful. And like many daycares, even in New York State, they are partially funded sometimes by public monies. And they were subject to review by children's services and or health agencies. And so there, she tells the story of the review of the facility, and the person who had come in to do the yearly inspection really wasn't very happy with what she said was Black people being successful. And to this day, Amber tells the story that the person who did the inspection intentionally went through the process to close down a successful Black business that not only was successful, but it was essential to the community that they lived in. That behavior was intentional. So many, many people lost out on that. And that was one of the more horrific stories I felt that were in the book. Also, you know, she told stories about how her parents put such a high degree of literacy in their family. And they would go to a book auction that was close by to where they lived, and they would buy bins of books and bring them home to their 5 children. And their children learned so much beyond what they were learning in the world around them, as far as crafts and skills. And the thing that sort of made me take pause was a bin of books is usually quite deep, and the usual reaction is for young people not to dig deep, but the family so deep dig deep in the bin. But the family had such a love of literacy and knew that education would be a key to their success. They dug all the way down to the bottom and of the bin and give those books that their parents brought home a lot of credit for the skills and knowledge that they had beyond schools. So, so many of the stories in the book really made me reflect on the world that we live in. It truly confirms that, you know what, we don't all live the same lives. So my question to you is, what did you think of the book? What was the author's purpose in writing the book? Did you have a story that stands out more than another? So I guess maybe if people have questions, we could do that. Can we do that? I think, Barb, are you there?
Sure we can. And Lisa, thank you very much. That was a very interesting book review.
Okay, you're welcome.
So with your questions, please type them into chat and I will read them so Lisa can respond. Okay, here we go. I'm not getting anything right now.
No questions.
I'm getting my chat moving around the bar at the bottom.
Hey, if people don't have questions, that's okay. Or reactions. I guess I would say to people, I hope that you enjoyed the book, in that it made you reflect on your own actions and behaviors, and to make sure that um, that message of respect and kindness to all people. I always say, it's not hard to be kind to one another. Um, this was a book that truly made me take pause and say, what, really? That happens? And those are the kinds of stories you just can't make up. I think I just saw a question pop up, Barb.
Oh, well, I'm not able to access it. Do you see it, Lisa?
Let me see. Yes. The question is, do you have a copy we can see? So I'm going to hold this up. Can you see that? It's a yellow cover. Of course, it's backwards, but I bet you're all good readers, so you see that.
It's fine. It's fine. You can see it.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Right. I'm looking at, right. It's technology. I hope that helps. Okay. Yes. The
Yeah.
participant says yes.
Any other questions? Do you see another one, Lisa?
No, I don't. But you know what? I can end, if there are no other questions, I have like a reader. So one good book leads to another good book. So I have three books that people might be interested in reading, that would not be on your reading list quite yet. The first one is Swandive. Swandive is an autobiography by the ballerina Georgina Pazcoquin. And it is the making, she terms it as the making of a rogue ballerina. This is an Asian American who was the first ballerina to be successful at the New York City Ballet. And she is a ballerina who started at the age of 16 at the School of the American Ballet, which is quite prestigious. She started at age 16. She was really the only student of color at the time. And it's stories about how she achieved the success that she did. And in the book, she talks about the casting of lead ballerinas for, Swan Lake, for the other one she talks about is the Nutcracker. It is extremely interesting. If you have any interest in ballet, that's what's originally got me to the title. But it definitely is a book that highlights how people are treated when they look different. It's an excellent book, truly is. Another book that takes us to a whole different spectrum that I've recently read is Social Graces by Renee Rosen, who tells a historical fiction of the white privileged in New York City in the late 1800s. It talks about the Astors, the Vanderbilts, and all the people that they encountered, how they were competitive people. They felt that money was everything. We know that it's not. And how they established roots in New York. But it does talk about white privilege And certainly that's a contrast to the other two books. The third book is a young adult book that I read. My grandson just started high school, not here in Elmira, but in Delaware. And he had to read, this was a summer read for him for his English class. And it's called Swing by Kane Alexander. And it's written in prose, which was extremely interesting. But it talks about issues of students, teenagers going into high school and how they interact with each other, how they establish their groups. But there is, it talks about how white students see Black students, how Black students see white students. And it is extremely interesting, and it gives you a wonderful perspective of how a ninth grade student sees the world going into a high school. And having been a high school principal, it was a great book. It was a great book. I loved it. So those are three other books that offer a perspective of a world we're not a part of necessarily. But again, we need to treat all people with kindness and respect. And if a book helps us understand that and reflect on our behaviors, that's why books are wonderful. So read, read, read. That's what I always say.
Okay, Lisa, let me see if I can do this, if I can get a question. No, I'm not getting it. I'm sorry. Let me try again here. I don't seem to be getting other questions. Oh, wait. A comment from J. Carol Lincoln to everyone said, "Thank you, very interesting."
You are welcome.
And I've had a moment or two after your book review to think about the book, and I did read it. And one of the stories that was very touching to me was when Lacey was at work, I believe, and somebody came over to her to touch her hair.
Ah, yes.
Do you
Right.
remember? Yes.
Right. Yes.
And how surprised and uncomfortable she was that somebody came over to her to touch her hair. It was so unusual.
Mm-hmm. It was that really would, is that okay to invade personal space? I suppose it is if you ask permission first.
Mhm.
And to think that somebody would think that that would be okay. It's like, again, what? Really? You did that?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
For sure.
That was something that stuck in my mind about this book. Yes, yes. Well, I don't see any more questions. Maybe we could wait for a moment longer. And these books that you mentioned, Lisa, sound very interesting, with the same idea behind them.
Right. And as I said, that isn't the intention of the book, but it certainly is enlightening. And it's sort of interesting that I was reading the same type. There were similar themes in these books where that is not what brought me to the book with when I look at Amber Ruffin's book, that specifically took me to that book. But to discover the other themes in the other books that I suggested is interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a chance, just by chance, so to speak.
Well, thank you again, Lisa. This
You're
was
more than welcome.
very interesting. And
Welcome.
I just want to mention to everybody who is online, our next book review is October 1st. And the book title is Grant by Ron Chernow. And it'll be reviewed by Dr. Lindsay, the president of Elmira College. So I just wanted people to know. Excuse me, Lisa, we have another comment from Liz Walton. This was my first opportunity to join in the book Sandwiched In, and will definitely check out this book. Thanks.
You are welcome.
How often do you think Amber is on Seth Meyers, Amber Ruffin on Seth Meyers?
Actually, she is a writer for Seth Meyers, so I'm not sure how often she appears presently, but now she has her own show, which is, I believe, on Peacock. And again, it's themes about her interactions with the world around her as a Black woman, and she makes a very serious topic humorous, which is interesting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And does she have another book out? Or was this the only one?
I believe this is the only one. I'm not aware of another book.
Okay, okay, okay. All right.
I think that might be it, Barb.
Okay, well, Lisa, again, thank you very much. It was
You
very,
are
very
welcome.
interesting.
Thank you for asking me. I was very happy to participate.
Well, it was
Good
great.
challenge.
Good, good. Take good care.
Yep.
Bye.
You too. Thank you, everybody. Be well.